Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel, Books with Nate. And today I'm going to be doing sort of a review of the last few months, or rather a look back on the last few months. It's been a while since I made a video. I got married. So yeah, that was kind of a lot of my time, but now I'm getting back into it. And yeah, let's just, I didn't really read that much, honestly, during that time, but let's just get into it and we'll talk about what I've read, what I am reading, and sort of what I plan to read in the next few months, pretty much. So, the first book I read really and finished was Dune by Frank Herbert. This is the sci fi classic, the Giga Chad of science fiction, and I really enjoyed it. It maybe wasn't my favorite. I think the first half for me was a little bit more compelling because I think the second half kind of took its own sort of turn and path, but it was just a different tone overall. But I really liked Lady Jessica and sort of how the Bene Gesserit interact with the Fremen, and how the Fremen themselves kind of have their own agency within the confines, I guess you could say, of what the Bene Gesserit have set up. I think the ending was a little lackluster, but overall, I really enjoyed it. I think I gave it like a 4 out of 5, but I would definitely recommend it. And if you tried to read it before, try it again. I think it's interesting and it's really cool to see just how impactful this book has been and how sort of widespread the influence is of this book on writers like even Robert Jordan of Wheel of Time, Red Rising. I'm reading Red Rising right now. Spoiler, I guess. And even Steven Erikson in Malazan. I think it's really cool to sort of see where a lot of this work is grounded in this book. Yeah, I'm gonna continue it at some point. I think I just need something a little less philosophical because I've already got enough of that going on with some other books. But yeah, I really enjoyed the themes, the characters, the world it's set in, and I'll definitely be continuing it. Next up was The Bone Hunters by Steven Erikson. This is the sixth book in the Malazan Book of the Fallen. I finally finished this. It took me a few months. I really liked it for the most part. It's not my favorite. I think in terms of ranking it, out of the six I've read so far, it's probably fifth. I liked it. It was still a good book. I just think where it's at, and I do plan to do a full review of this at some point, probably soon. But I think where it was at in terms of the story, it kind of falls between, the sort of the first half of the series really is kind of its own, in a way, arc. I don't know. You kind of get the end of, what are they called? The end, oh, Jesus. The end of the Bridge Burners, and sort of beginning of the Bone Hunters, the 14th Army. And I think it was just sort of like this cascade from Midnight Tides, which I really loved, and House of Chains and Memories of Ice. You kind of get this like cascade of events and characters, and I just found them all really compelling. But you're kind of trying to get back into this new army, but I grew into it eventually, and I enjoyed the last few hundred pages or so. I just think it took a little time for me to sort of attach to it, and I think thematically it was interesting. Obviously, I'm going to continue with the series at some point, but I just need a little. I'm taking a little break from it right now, just reading a few other books, but I really loved it for the most part. Liked it. Yeah, it had its highs. Absolutely had its highs, but I think the rest of it was kind of like, I felt like I was floating along the journey. So yeah, I liked the book. I still like the series. I love the series, but it's just not my favorite. Next up is A Game of Thrones by George R.R. Martin. This is the first book in A Song of Ice and Fire. I finally finished this after starting it in May. I think I've picked it up for the first time in college, got about halfway through, and then never really finished it. So I almost got to that halfway point, I think, in May, but I stopped. But yeah, this time I finally pushed through. I think I finished this up in, yeah, like mid-October, I think. Yeah, I was just needing that sort of old school-ish classic fantasy, sort of like, I want to read the prose, I want to be sort of in this low magical setting. But yeah, the book was good. I gave it about a 4 to 5, I think. But uh, there were definitely moments of felt like I was sort of just there, kind of rolling along. But there were also a lot of highs in this book. I think the characters like Catelyn and Tyrion and Jon were all very compelling. And I just think, the last few chapters of the book were really a really good setup for the second book. So I would say if you haven't read this book, I definitely recommend it. It's not as in your face as the show is. I think the show definitely takes some liberties in some ways with it all. I think in some ways this book is potentially not as good in those aspects. I think overall it was a good book, and I plan to read Clash of Kings at some point. It's sitting right next to me most of the time, and I'm just thinking about it. And I don't plan to read it now or the next few months, but when I want that sort of traditional, a little bit more traditional but modern setting, I'll definitely pick this up again. Up next, I read volume 8 and 9 of Vinland Saga. I'm so glad I picked this back up. It has been a few months since I read it, and it's such a good manga, series, story. Just, I think the messages it sends are very compelling around nonviolence and just sort of being set in this what's usually portrayed as a very violent time, and I think it was, but especially following a culture and characters that are not always portrayed in a very peaceful manner. I just think sort of taking that turn around it was just really interesting, and it's very drawing to me. And yeah, I plan to continue this series. Thorfinn is a great character, and the characters in the cast around him are all unique. And yeah, no, I definitely plan to keep reading this series. So now I want to start with my current reads. The first up is Red Rising. I really just picked this up on a whim. I was feeling the need to read something like this, I think. I don't know. I know a lot of people love this series. I really like this book so far. It's first-person point of view following Darrow, who is a red. It's kind of this caste society set in Mars, on Mars in the future, and he's a red, which is essentially the lowest, kind of almost slave-like group of people in the society, and it follows him and his journey, and kind of it's a rebellion almost in some ways, but I won't spoil too much. But it's essentially Hunger Games set on Mars, and I really liked the Hunger Games when I read it in, I think, late middle school, early high school. So I was happy to pick this up. Yeah, it's good. I can definitely tell there's the writing isn't as good as I think it could be, but I understand the second book picks up exponentially in terms of writing. But yeah, no, I think the plot, the world, the setting is really interesting. So yeah, I'm going to continue with this series. I'll probably pick up the second book right away, I think. Yeah, I just really like it. The second book I'm reading is Legend by David Gemmell. This is it's kind of like an epic, not epic in that sense, but just like feels epic, following a character, Druce the Legend. And it's kind of like an 80s heroic fantasy. But I think what's interesting about it is that it takes a very, I think, realistic approach to like an older veteran, essentially, who's a legend, but he's trying to kind of live up to the hype still, but also being a little more realistic about it. You follow him and several other characters, and I really like it so far. I read it a chapter at a time, kind of when I'm in the mood. I do enjoy it, but I just kind of want to take it slowly because I think the writing kind of is that way. That's just kind of how I approach his style of writing. It's not super complex or hard or anything. I just think the story deserves its, to breathe a little bit. So I really like it. Taking my time with it, but that doesn't mean I'm not liking it. I enjoy it a lot. So Legend by David Gemmell is a pretty good book, and I plan to read more of his works for sure. So there's a lot of books that are going on right now. So the next up is Mr. Mercedes by Stephen King. I'm listening to this on audio on the way to work, and I don't remember the name of the voice actor, but I think he's a great voice actor. Anyways, I really find the story interesting. It follows sort of this retired detective cop who had one sort of case that he couldn't solve, and it follows him and the person who committed those murders, essentially. And it's weird at times, but I think overall it's interesting. It's a kind of, Stephen King does a good job at sort of keeping it fast-paced in this, I would say. Not super fast-paced, but, I think gives the characters time to sort of breathe and be their own sort of interesting selves, essentially. So, yeah, I plan to keep reading this series or listening to it. I picked up Holly recently, which I understand kind of takes place after this, or follows Holly Gibney, who you see in this series. I think we met her in The Outsider, which is the first time that I met that character. So yeah, I plan to read this series, this trilogy, and yeah, I like it so far. It's a good audiobook, so check out the audiobook if you like audiobooks. Oh, and I forgot to mention, I'm also reading Becoming a Druid by Mike Mallman. This is a self-published book. I plan to read it a little bit more soon, actually, so I guess you could count it as a TBR. I think it's a little interesting. I haven't gotten very far into it, so I think I'm just going to finish some other stuff first and then get to that. But yeah, I want to read more self-published books. So yeah, that's on the radar right now. Now onto my TBR in the next few months. Of course, I'm going to continue Malazan. So this is book 7 in Malazan Book of the Fallen, Reaper's Gale. I'm just looking forward to this. I think there's been a lot of setup in the last few books with certain characters that I think are going to come to a head in this. So I'm really looking forward to it. I think it's going to be like epic and awesome, and I really can't wait for it. I know this is kind of a controversial book. It's either this or Toll the Hounds, in terms of just, where people drop off completely. But I don't think that's going to happen to me. I still enjoy the slower parts. I still enjoy sort of taking our time with characters. So yeah, I'm looking forward to getting into this probably in the next few weeks. Next up on my TBR is Frankenstein. I know this is after Halloween. I planned to read it before Halloween, but I just kind of set it down for a little bit. My friend Annie, I think she's going to start a YouTube channel soon. She recommended it to me. I have never read it. I know it's the sci-fi classic by Mary Shelley, sort of like the OG sci-fi book. And yeah, I do find the first few letters interesting enough. I think I need when I'm not in a good mood, I don't really want to read from the point of view of like an aristocrat. And yeah, I just, if I'm a little upset, I don't want to read that, just because, yeah. But it is interesting enough, and I know it's something that should be read, and so I definitely want to read it. And Annie, I will read it soon, because she read Gardens of the Moon for me, so I owe her a few. So I think that's it for now, for what I've read and my TBR and stuff like that. I plan to release a few more videos soon, like the Bone Hunters review. I might do one for Dune, I'm not sure. But yeah, no, you'll get more videos soon enough. Thanks for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe and let me know how you're doing. Leave a comment down below, and I will talk to you soon.